Oh, welcome back to the State of Football, Part 51 here on October 12th, 2020. Your new home for real football talk in the mornings. Of course, I am one of your co-hosts, RIC, and a place to be, Ric Serritella. Tell it like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything football since 2002. It's what we do. Make sure you log on, NFLDraftBible.com, the virtual edition available now. Of course, my co-host, John Murphy, VP and Director of Player Personnel for the Toronto Argonauts, joining us down in New Orleans. And I got my New Jersey Bash brothers in the house. Of course, the Assistant Commissioner there at the Northeast Conference, Ralph Ventri, and who I should mention is just north of me in the Jersey Shore. And then you have our Director of Scouting at NFL Draft Bible, Ryan Roberts, who is kind of southwest of me in New Jersey, more towards the Philly area. We'll talk about the NFC least. We'll talk about the hot topics. We'll talk about some pink slips being served here on Monday morning, but we start off with a tale of two different quarterbacks, scenes of a different kind. We'll group them together because there's a lot to talk about. First off, watching Dak Prescott go down with just a nasty, gruesome injury that was tough to watch. It was really something to see the image of Jason Garrett, who's coached Dak his entire career, consoling new coach Mike McCarthy with his predecessor, Tony Romo, in the booth, calling it as it unfolded. And you wonder, as they carted him away off in the tunnel, if that's the last you'll ever see of Dak Prescott. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Kyle Allen taken out of the game for the Washington football team, and Alex Smith returning from a gruesome injury. So as one returns, another one exits, and they're ready to hand this guy comeback player of the year already. And I understand the sympathy, but if everybody has a different meaning of what comeback player of the year means. If it's really the most valuable and contributive player, it would be Ben Roethlisberger. But I understand the vote for Alex Smith. I'm going to start this one off. I'll go over to you, Ralph, with your thoughts just on Dak and Alex, what we saw there from the two quarterbacks.
Well, the first thing with Dak, you never want to see that. That's the unfortunate side, the ugly side of football. And it doesn't happen often. But when it happens, it's ugly, and you never want to see that guy go down, a guy who was really starting to hit the prime of his career. And, hopefully he'll be able to recover. Obviously, I'm no doctor, but I don't think he's getting back on the field this season. I saw some things from Pro Football Doc on Twitter. Probably his career will be saved, but he definitely won't be playing football for a long time. And then as far as Alex Smith goes, a great story of triumph. I'm glad that he was able to get healthy enough where he could step on an NFL field again. It was nice to see him there with his family in the seats. And I watched some of that game. But from what I saw, Alex Smith was just a shell of his former self. I think he averaged 2 or 3 yards per pass attempt. A couple times he didn't want to run it. He looked tentative to run where the old Alex Smith would have taken off for a 25-yard gain. And he's older now. I believe he's north of 35. And his career probably has limited days to begin with, but it's nice that he could get back onto the field, and he would definitely have some value for a team as a backup and as a mentor. I'm sure he'd be great in the quarterback room, but as a starter, as the guy you saw lead the 49ers to playoff games, former number 1 pick in the draft, unfortunately, I think we will no longer see that Alex Smith. And for Dak, I think he's young enough. and the medical advances in time will allow him to get back on the field, and maybe Dak will be able to salvage some of his career. But unfortunately, Alex Smith is in the twilight, but definitely a nice story.
Yeah, and Dak Prescott, again, obviously the contract long-term being the big underlining story beneath the story, and he won't be seeing that kind of money anytime soon. You hate to see it. So we will continue to keep our thoughts and prayers with Dak Prescott and his family. We'll continue to monitor that Washington QB situation now, as Dwayne Haskins was home with an illness, but you saw Smith get sacked a handful of times. Aaron Donald, reservations in the backfield with Alex Smith. I think those were the two big takeaways from yesterday. Usually when a GM and coach gets axed, that's the big headliner. But the gruesome injury of Dak Prescott, the return of Alex Smith, kind of dominating the headlines here. But let's shift gears and talk about pink slips being distributed. We saw it last week, John. The first domino fall in Houston. We kind of knew, and again, Dan Quinn, the pride of Morristown, New Jersey, you hate to see it, along with Thomas Dimitrioff out in Atlanta. The writing was on the wall here. This was kind of inevitable, and now here we are just a month into the football season, and Atlanta's blowing it all up.
Yeah, and I think you got to like that Arthur Blank, if you're now the next people in line there, you got to like what you're walking into in the sense of with that ownership. Because, boy, you want to talk about this is multiple times since it was, 28-3. We all know, where we were, and we all see them, even in the third quarter, right? We even see them at a point where the Falcons, everybody, from when they showed you in the box, even Quinn let himself get a little excited, thinking that maybe, they had the Patriots number that day until they didn't, right? He kind of caught himself even on camera. There's a point in time of that Super Bowl where he's allowing himself to kind of feel what it would feel like to win the Super Bowl. And then he kind of catches himself and gets everybody back in order, there on the sideline. But from that moment forward, there's been a number of times where you got to give Arthur Blank, serious kudos for loyalty and sticking to your guns and believing that your people are your people, because that there are plenty places that after 28-3 and you don't win, and you've put in the resources and you've given them everything they can, and you have what you consider a generational quarterback for that organization in Matt Ryan, that there's been a few attempts, right? They tried to go the defensive route and they couldn't hold on to all those guys. Now they tried drafting, and unfortunately some of those defensive players were kind of one-hit wonders. Vic Beasley, some of them have gotten injured. Some of them they've tried to kind of repeat what they had, but Tack McKinley and Keanu Neal, they've kind of been hit and miss with some of their draft picks, with things. And then when you're spending the amount of money offensively that they are spending, right? It's at one point, every guy on the offense is a first-round pick. And you have to be scoring more than the Chiefs in order to make that work. And if you're not, you're going to have these fundamental problems. So 2 7-9 seasons, that normally puts anybody on the hot seat. But you start off 1-7, and then you down the stretch, you played 500, right? The turnaround is because you were 1-7, then going 5-4, actually, kind of looks decent down the stretch. But you forget, it's not like down the stretch they went from 1-7 to 7-1, right? It was kind of 500 football, and they had some wins there. But again, remember, Carolina fired their people. Tampa Bay blew up their situation, after last year. So, down the stretch, I would have taken it with a little bit less, kind of grain of salt there. And then I think the Falcons, by not having an offseason, dealing with all the COVID stuff, there was never a chance to kind of keep some of that rhythm from down the stretch and work it over into this season. And then you just have the things that happen to him. You kind of knew after that first one with the onside kick from hell, that they didn't know what to deal with, sort of set them on that trend. You go 0-7 one season to start, 0-5 the next. Yeah, that's going to get people fired, in that scenario. And it'll be very interesting to see what direction Arthur Blank now takes that team, right? You see what they're doing with Carolina, and they're doing it with a new owner, bringing Matt Rule from college, and they've had a good draft, and they may not be winning every game, but when they are, they look pretty good. They're doing it without their best offensive player, and they're doing it while developing. So they're rebuilding on the fly, and they're not having to go 0-5, right? So that's kind of troublesome. You have Tom Brady in your division, and even without that, the Bucs have a lot of younger players, and are in a good spot. And with or without Drew Brees moving forward, the Saints have all the drafts that they've done. Then they will have a ton of salary cap space when they don't have Drew Brees. So if you're Atlanta, this next move is as much about your forward identity, because you have less games left in Matt Ryan's career than you have games played, right? Like you're going to have somebody who can manufacture and work with the cap right now with Matt Ryan, but also be smart enough to find who's the next guy to play quarterback after Matt Ryan and develop a little better nucleus of they don't play well together right now. Like their offense and defense, it's not a match made in heaven. If you're going to play that kind of offense, I think you better have a defense that's attacking, gives up some big plays, but get your offense the ball back, because you're spending all your money on that side of the ball. So it'll be very interesting to see now, is a Scott Pioli, a John Dorsey, like a veteran GM in the mix for teams like them in Houston, or do they follow the trend of what they saw work right over there with Carolina and maybe go with some younger folks and bring some new blood into that organization? But, they're in a much different spot. That Houston job, now we're seeing two jobs available. That Houston job with Watson is a much more favorable job at the moment than what you have with the Falcons, because you're going to have to do some really heavy lifting.
Guy, yeah. I mean, if you're a big Deshaun Watson believer, which the guy, I think his style lends him to being injury prone, just his style of play. It's a lot of money to pay a quarterback. You have no draft picks there for the next year or two. So if I'm a rebuilder, I don't know. But you mentioned,
Rick, let me ask you guys a question about this whole Dan Quinn and Falcons situation. I mean, obviously there are a lot of things going on there and a lot of reasons as to why Dan Quinn is losing his job. But doesn't Matt Ryan deserve some of the blame in this? I mean, was it me, or did he look lost yesterday? I mean, it may be time for them to move on from Matt Ryan sooner than later. I mean, I just don't know what happened to him.
And again, another big money quarterback where, can you really build a team when you're paying him that much money? I'm a big Matty Ice supporter, but I mean, I think he's one of the more overrated players in the National Football League. And absolutely, at some point in time, you got to evaluate everything. I think everything's on the table for the Falcons gig. I will say this, here we are, and Arthur Blank, the first time ever he's fired somebody in season, right? And so here we are now 2 months or a month into the NFL season, and two teams now looking for a GM and a head coach. Now, you mentioned Coach Rule. I can't help but to think here.
Play for you. Matt Ryan at 10-1 is
somebody, please. So you got a guy, Coach Rule now. He loses Christian McCaffrey, goes 3-0, right? 2 years ago, it was the Jets. I'm here in New Jersey where our football teams are 0-10 combined. 2 years ago, it was Rule who was decided to get the job for the Jets, but said, no. You can't pick your assistants. And Rule gave him the one-finger salute. This past year, he interviews with the Giants, goes down to Carolina, even gives the Giants a last Hail Mary phone call because he's from New York. He says, G-Men, I got a deal on the table here. I'm giving you one last offer. Do you want to match it? Nah, coach, we're good. Well, guess what? It's looking like the wrong move. And, Gase now on the hot seat, but sticking with the two vacant jobs, I'm going to go over to you, Ryan Roberts, who's been waiting patiently. You've got two head coaching jobs on the table. From a GM perspective, guys that come to mind, Ed Dobbs, who's doing a great job in Indianapolis. You've got Brian Gaines there in Buffalo, who came over from Houston. Elliott Wolf up in New England. If you want to go outside the box, maybe Louis Riddick and Daniel Jeremiah get some consideration. But who are the names here that you are monitoring here, Ryan, for these two openings?
Well, just with my talking with David Turner over the last couple of weeks, he's thrown out Dobbs' name a couple of times as a person that he is very familiar with, has a lot of belief in. I think Daniel Jeremiah is an interesting one with like the Mayock move that we saw recently. I think it's a really interesting conversation because I think to Ralph's point about, is the Falcons, are they going to just tear it all the way down? Because one thing that John said that I thought was very interesting is what's the next vision? What are we looking for a short rebuild or are we going into the full rebuild? I think that's the biggest difference between the Houston Texans job right now with Deshaun Watson being a younger quarterback. We have maybe more of a long-term vision. For a team like the Atlanta Falcons, do they go for a quick fix for the general manager, head coaching side of things where maybe, hey, I can get the defense good enough that this offense can still, keep going to the degree they can when they're all healthy, and then I can fix that defense well enough so that we can compete. So I think that it's really going to be very dependent on what the vision is for these two teams. So Dobbs and Jeremiah are two guys kind of on the different spectrum. Jeremiah, a little bit of a younger guy, has not been in the front office as much. He's been more of in the scouting department. But I really want to do more research on Mr. Dobbs because, David has literally brought him up the last 3 weeks, probably 6 times to me, saying this is the guy that you need to keep an eye on. This is the guy you need to keep an eye on. I just really think that it depends solely on what the vision is for these franchises moving forward.
Yeah, Indianapolis is loaded in that front office. They've got a bunch of front office executives and scouts who are probably future GMs there. Dobbs, I think, is the next in line. Our good friend Mike DeRice is the guy I'm looking for to kind of go up the ladder here in the coming years. But Ralph, you mentioned John saying Houston is a more appealing job. Let me throw that question over to you because honestly, I look at both of these teams. I don't see a lot of blue chipper talent laying around. And in fact, Houston, I don't think they've got any talent outside of Deshaun Watson because let's be real, this is not a reload. This is a rebuild. And at this point, J.J. Watt either needs to retire or get dealt because he ain't going to be around to see the good times roll in Houston. And then I look at Atlanta. They've got a couple of good wide receivers there in place. But outside of that, I just don't see a whole heck of a lot to build around. So which job, if you are the next GM, which job is more appealing to you?
Well, an NFL job is an NFL job, so I'll take either one of them if the teams come calling. But I don't think they're going to come calling my name. But with that said, there's only one difference. I'm not a huge scout, so I don't know. I can't really give you an evaluation of the rosters from 1 to 53. But from what I see, it's 2 average to below average ball clubs, and there's really only one difference, and that's Deshaun Watson, who's a younger quarterback, who's hitting his prime years, and it will all come down to who do you believe in more? Do you believe in Deshaun Watson? Because if so, then that job may be more attractive to you because you feel like you have that franchise quarterback in place. Whereas in Atlanta, you're going to have to go find that franchise quarterback because Matt Ryan, his better years may be behind him. But the other factor, and this goes to what John was saying, is Arthur Blank, how do you feel about ownership, and how do you feel about the people you'll be working for? The personnel and the talent in Atlanta may not be as high as it is in Houston, but you may feel more comfortable working for that particular boss or that particular owner. I don't know what the dynamics are with the Houston ownership, but what you can see from Atlanta is you have an owner who is absolutely willing to invest money in the roster. He's shelled out a lot of money to pay Julio Jones. He's been loyal to his guys, so to speak, and he gave Dan Quinn a number of chances. So it seems like it's an attractive place in Atlanta because the ownership seems to be friendly to the staff. So there are a lot of things you have to weigh. But as far as talent, I think really both teams are probably around the same level, but one team has a much younger quarterback and a quarterback that some view as a franchise player. And he certainly has flashes. Deshaun Watson certainly has the wow factor, but he doesn't really have a supporting cast. And can he do it consistently?
Yeah, I think the other factor, too, you've still got Jack Easterby in Houston, and is he kind of a mole on the wall? Paul McNair's kind of eyes and ears inside the building. But I don't know. I'm doing the math. I'm saying, you got Houston, Atlanta, halfway in between is New Orleans. I know a guy that's been hanging out up north with a couple of Grey Cups and has rebuilt a few organizations in the past. Who am I looking at, Mr. Murphy?
Better mock draft than Daniel Jeremiah, too. I'm just saying.
Parting shots to the people on this whole Houston Atlanta. You have a preference?
Yeah, I think the way that where today's NFL seems to be heading, the common sense would be to follow what I said, which is Houston, because you have that guy. However, you're going to have to make sure everybody agrees with that, right? Because we mentioned how did those conversations go with Ron Rivera, and his coaching staff prior to getting to Washington? Was it that, do you believe Haskins is the guy? Was it something, along the lines of, give him a look and we'll see what happens? Or did you get a lot of, say the right thing, but then you got there, and this is a whole different, situation and scenario with them. We're going to see that with different groups and different people, right? You saw, new GMs and new coaches, they double down, and off goes Baker Mayfield back in the right direction. You're with the Jets, if they had pulled off a miracle yesterday, it would have been really interesting to see if Joe Flacco or Joe anybody would have won a game for the Jets if all of a sudden Sam Darnold didn't need to sit and watch, some games. So you see how people, the Mitchell Trubisky thing lasted about until the Bears thought they were going to lose a game they shouldn't have lost and then been in a pickle, and they went to Nick Foles and never to be seen again, maybe Mitchell Trubisky. So the one thing you do have in Atlanta, if you had the full support of your ownership, is you have a chance with your bad record to be in the top 10. You have a chance to trade two not fading stars, but on the verge of past performance being better than current performance in Julio Jones would get you a nice take, and Matt Ryan between now and next year's draft would go somewhere for a team that needs a quarterback. And if you did both of those two things, you could now set yourself up, if you're the Falcons, to have draft capital, which is what the Saints, and the Panthers have used to try their turnarounds. You get rid of two huge salaries that are cumbersome, and now you could have a shot of drafting a top 10 quarterback. Right now, it's a top 3 quarterback in terms of you're going to be in the top 3 to 5 picks this year, in that situation. You then have a quarterback under contract for 5 years. And then making the decision of what to do next is not trying to hold on to games and seasons that have already passed you and passed you by. It's that you're on the track then to a rebuild that is probably, you can cut it down, to 12, 18, 24 months. Because if you try to double down on the Matt Ryan part, then when it doesn't work, you're going to be in year 2 or 3 as a GM or coach, and now you're having to do all that. And that becomes a struggle. If you're in Houston, if you buy in that you have the quarterback, well, now you better start taking those moves so that you don't have the best years of Deshaun Watson be used up by not having the right combination of talent around. J.J. Watt's contract, you mentioned, it's flexible. He doesn't have a lot left on it. The Merciless deal is suspect. The Tunsil deal was a disaster. That's not the way to negotiate. You just don't go up $4 million out of position, even left tackle. The good news is the David Johnson, Fuller, and Cooks deals are not as bad, but do you want to turn around and the only guy you have that can stretch the field for them on a consistent basis is Cooks? And are you going to turn around and trade Cooks again, which has kind of been the thing? He's like a fantasy football player. You draft him and then you trade him. There's a better chance of maybe trading a guy like Fuller, maybe move on from David Johnson, even though he's played well in spurts for you. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there under your cap. But we mentioned the major thing for if you're the GM and you're interviewing GM candidates in Houston, better be that you have a heck of a scouting staff and a heck of a pro personnel department, because every team that has that $35+ million quarterback runs into issues when their picks don't work out or their main free agent gets hurt or other. The middle to back end of those rosters are what are hurting those clubs and keeping them from being consistent. So you better really do a really good job like Kansas City has to augment the factor that they were confident you could play and continue to play with Mahomes making that kind of money, because they've had that kind of success pro-wise, draft-wise, late-round picks, guys out of Canada, guys that they're developing on the practice roster. That's what you're going to have to do, because you see it's hurting the Eagles. It's definitely affecting the Cowboys, and that's a whole other story about yesterday was brutal. What could be really brutal is the factor that this might actually be the thing that makes them be a better team. In the long run, they have a better operation with just using a game manager type guy and not a $40 million quarterback, because you have 3 receivers, you have a tight end, you have money spent on the O-line, you have a starting and a backup running back. If the Cowboys could spend that $35 to $40 million out amongst the rest of their team, they are a better football team.
Well, that leads me into my next question, and we're on the State of Football here, Part 51 edition, October 12th, 2020, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. Hey, did you catch our NFL Draft tailgate show on Saturday? Woo! What a lot of fun that was. We'll be back at it again every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, your new college football pregame show. It's a pregame show with the NFL Draft slant. We can't stop, won't stop, baby. We're 6 days a week now. Of course, the State of Football, 9 a.m. Eastern weekdays. We'll talk more about the front office and executives and head coaches tomorrow with our guy Russ Landy as we recap the college football weekend. But a lot to get into. John mentioned Andy Dalton. He's echoing what Tony Dungy commented on last night. Just Andy Dalton could be that guy that this team needs. But, Ryan, I'm going to go over to you where the NFC least. My next question is, we've still got, I don't know, about a dozen games left to play. Nobody wants to win the division. Dallas in the driver's seat, 2-3 with Andy Dalton. The Eagles dropped the Battle of Pennsylvania there yesterday. They fall to 1-2-1, I believe. You've got Washington now who has the most favorable schedule. If you look at their schedule, it's probably the easiest in the entire league over the course of the next month. We won't even mention the Giants, but out of those three teams, Ryan, where does this NFC least go?
Rick, why do you have to ask me the hardest questions? I want to say if everyone's healthy, it's going to be Dallas, but I can't with this defense in the state it is right now. The Philadelphia Eagles look like a dumpster fire as well, but for what it was yesterday, playing against a pretty good Steelers team, an undefeated team, they went toe-to-toe with them for most of the game. It was a competitive football game, a score late. They're a missed field goal away from maybe that game being a completely different momentum swing. So if I had to pick right now, I would pick the Philadelphia Eagles for what it is. Not that they are playing the greatest football to really make me have conviction in what I'm saying here, but every week I see this Dallas defense just so bad. They're maybe the worst unit in the NFL defensively. It is pathetic the defensive effort they put forth every week. And now we have their quarterback out. I know Andy Dalton is obviously at least a damn good backup quarterback, and he's going to keep you afloat because at worst he's a very solid, competent quarterback at the NFL level. But is he going to be able to make up for the lack of defense that you have on a week-to-week basis for the Dallas Cowboys? That offensive line is a wreck right now with all the injuries. Tyron Smith out, La'el Collins out. The center position has a rookie starting there. Zach Martin's your only good offensive lineman right up front. So I'm looking at this and I can't buy into what the Cowboys are in the state that they are at the moment. So I guess by default, I'm going to pick the Philadelphia Eagles because they showed me a little toughness yesterday against the Steelers for most part of the game. They fell behind. They didn't drop their heads and they didn't just, get blown out of the building. They came back and they played a tough football game for 3.5 quarters. So I guess Philadelphia Eagles by default, but there is absolutely zero conviction in that point or in my voice probably.
Yeah, it's hard to be confident about any of these teams. John, good point that Dallas might get Anthony Brown, Van Der Esch, and Gregory back. Van Der Esch, I'm not counting on anything with that neck injury. But I agree with Ryan here. I think the Eagles eke it out again. And shame on me. Here I was stumptified last weekend. I will never forget Chase Claypool ever again. Mapletron, I love the Canadian reference. 4 touchdowns in that game against the Eagles there. They were kind of hanging around, and showing improvement. So I think the Eagles have a fighter's chance here. But we're going around the table, open round table discussion with John Murphy, Ralph Ventri, and Ryan Roberts. Ralph, I sent out a kind of hit list of different things that we were going to talk about today, and a lot of breaking news came down the wire since then. So I'll give you the open floor, whatever direction you want to go in. Topics from yesterday, game that you want to talk about. The floor is yours, my man, from a hot and heavy Week 4 NFL action.
Well, first of all, Ryan is talking about the Dallas Cowboys offensive line struggles with injuries, and he doesn't mention the big reinforcement they brought in. Greg Senat saw a couple snaps yesterday, saw his first live NFL action. Former tackle from Wagner College here in the NEC.
Yes, indeed.
And Senat was drafted by the Ravens, injured his rookie year, never saw the field, got a Super Bowl ring as a member of the Chiefs practice squad last year, and was with the Browns, claimed by the Cowboys, and he saw a few snaps yesterday. So that's cool to see. Wagner College had 3 players active yesterday. You had Cam Gill on Thursday Night Football. I know the Draft Bible was high on him as a small school prospect last year.
Special teams tackle Thursday night.
And then special teams tackle, Cam Gill in his NFL debut. And then another guy who's been hanging around the league for 8 years now, Julian Stanford. He's playing special teams for the Carolina Panthers. He wrapped up a 2-year tenure with my Buffalo Bills. And really, that's kind of what I want to talk about next. Not the Bills in particular, but this Bills-Titans game Will they play on Tuesday? You mentioned some of the news coming down this morning. Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network, he reported that no positive tests or no new positives in Tennessee. Obviously a good sign that this game will go off on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And I'll let you guys talk about whether or not you think the game will or should go on. But before I throw it over to you guys, I just want to point out a lot of the positives that are happening in the way the NFL is dealing with COVID, because everybody seems to be, or not everybody, but the Twitterverse seems to jump into a panic. Oh, the season's going to end. Here it goes. Ba, ba, ba. No. 30 of 32 NFL teams had 0 positives on Sunday morning. 30 of 32. That's a pretty good percentage. And what it shows you is that the protocols are working when they are being followed. Okay? And the fact that no other team, except one club, the Titans, no other team had more than 4 people on the COVID list. Okay? When you're talking about 69 players and a number of staffers, that's a small percentage. And that leads me to the next topic, which is the Titans. Every other team, no other team had more than 4 people on the COVID list, and they have 24. So in terms of the Titans, it's not bad luck. Something wrong happened along the way. But it seems like they finally have everything traced and accounted for, and it seems like they'll be able to play this game on Tuesday night.
Yeah, Titans and Patriots, no new positives. The Titans practiced yesterday. John, any thoughts? I mean, only 88 positive tests in the 3 months of testing. I don't know how many thousands of tests they've conducted, but only 88 positives over the last 3 months. Agree or disagree with Ralph's sentiments here?
Yeah, I think you agree for the most part, other than what he's saying, which is the hypersensitive, response to anything you hear. Now they've gone and said the Bengals, are way behind in, kind of turning in their information or having enough information turned in to know how they're doing, what they're doing. And then the Bengals come out and say, well, hey, it's due to our facilities. We're not set up to, to be able to do things the way, that others are. You saw the other day, in that game on Saturday night, Notre Dame dressed guys in 3 different areas. They had guys in their dressing room, then they had guys in an adjoining room, and then they had guys getting dressed in the athletic department, probably the guys that weren't playing, but if you were on scholarship, you were getting dressed across the street, in a third spot and coming across, to be in the game. So one of the other things you got to realize is everybody's situation and how they're doing this is different based also on how they're, set up. And the Bengals have a very different setup. One thing, if you ever have covered the Bengals, gone to a Bengals game or gone to see them, during training camp, this isn't, a club that is, the Dallas Cowboys, right? They're not just renting out a hotel. They're not just able to, bring in 100 extra workers to do what they have to do, to get things done. So they're talking about having to use the parking lot, put up tents in order for guys to get traced and tested every day, with things. So I think you're going to see more of it, because right now the story is never going to be about the 31, right? The story is everyone wants to know what's going on with Tennessee, right? Like everybody wants to know what's the culprit, what did they do wrong, how did that happen, why? Because it's the only drama that's really going on, So you want to know that, right? You don't want to know about the 999 coworkers that are doing it the right way. We want to know about Ryan Roberts running the streets on a Saturday night after a Rutgers win. We want to know what he's doing. That's what people want to know, because that's what COVID that's what it's done, right? We're all indoors, right? We get Monday mornings, we get Ralph wearing, the suit and tie up top and probably shorts on the bottom. He's rocking the Jim Kelly shorts for sure. So everybody, that's the problem is they're always going to want to know who's the one guy testing, right? Who's the one person that's not doing it the right way? Because what you hear is about the 1% or the lower percent that's not doing it the right way, not the factor that we got through an entire NHL bubble with nothing, very limited situations and issues with the NBA, most of which came up in the first couple of weeks, which is expected with the number of people that you had going in and out of there, and the rules were changing on the fly. But the one thing right now that's happening is literally the NFL is taking every precaution when it comes to the current rosters and the current team you have. But what it is affecting is you're to the point where you cannot conduct a workout. It is to the point where those rules are changing according to teams every 24 hours, if not longer, to where your guy is flying in today. That guy will not have an effect on anything to do with your team for at least a 2-week period of time, because he's not able to work out until after being there for 5 days clear, which means you're already to your next weekend, which means that guy's first day of trying out is probably not till next Monday. Then he's got to process to your practice roster or other. So, I mean, you're seeing what's happening. What's Jacksonville's corner in the kicker market? They've got 5 guys, at kicker somewhere in their organization at the moment. I think that's the part that is going to get very interesting in the leaner days moving forward. If you keep seeing the injuries go down at the rate that they are, the NFL is going to have to find a substitute, or they're going to have to find a way to get these guys COVID cleared with a quicker turnaround than saying it's 5 to 7 days before you can even get somebody in the building for a workout.
That's crazy. I mean, you essentially got to fly a guy in on Thursday, pay for his flight, put him up in a hotel for 5 days, pay for his COVID tests just so he could do a tryout on Tuesday. Yeah, I just think you're going to see teams continue to sign off with each other's practice squads, and of course you can protect up to 4 guys each week, I think it is. But the State of Football here, Part 51 edition, October 12th, with Ric Serritella, John Murphy, Ralph Ventri, and Ryan Roberts. A lot of big upsets yesterday, Ryan. The Raiders knocking off the Patriots, the Dolphins knocking off the 49ers. Of course, we had the Seahawks big come-from-behind victory late last night. Anything you want to discuss specifically here from the NFL recap?
So the Cleveland Browns are 4-1, as everybody anticipated happening. So that's good for once. It looks like they finally got their guy in Stefanski. Everything looks like it's going along pretty good. In the preseason, I was a fan of what this Indianapolis Colts team could do. I still think that they have a very good roster overall. Phillip Rivers is another situation that they have to kind of talk about a little bit. But 4-1 Cleveland Browns, given their due for a second, they're a traditionally team to kind of poke fun at. But 4-1, everything looks like it's rolling pretty well. Coaching looks a whole lot better. The offense, there's starting to get the playmakers involved. So hats off to the Cleveland Browns for their good start and coming out yesterday and beating what has been a very good Colts defense over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I see John smirking. He called that one. I had the Colts, he had the Browns. We give it to you. Also, it just
thanks to you and Turner. That was what it was.
Our super producer Samantha here telling us Raheem Morris, the former Bucs head coach, will be the interim head coach for the Falcons. So Atlanta replaces one Jersey guy with another. Ralph, I see you were chomping at the bit to chime in there.
No, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that news that Sammy was sending us. I think she said it was reported by Schefter, the great Adam Schefter. But at least it's good to see one Jersey guy gets his pink slip, but at least they replace him with another Jersey guy, Raheem Morris from Irvington, New Jersey. And obviously has head coaching experience with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I believe. And just an all-around good guy, a good defensive coach, a football lifer, and somebody who can just come in and steady the ship here for the rest of the season at least.
Yeah, we go from Morris County to Essex County. If you're from Jersey, then you know. We're winding down here, Ralph. I know you won't be able to join us tomorrow, but, since your Bills will be in action, I believe they are playing, is it the Patriots? I can't keep up with all this. But you want to give us a little –
Titans. The 3-0 Tennessee COVID-riddled Titans.
Take it away. Take it away.
COVID-depleted Titans. So I don't know if Corey Davis will be available for the Titans. I know they had a few guys in the defensive line rotation who are on this COVID list. Who knows what their team will look like, but they will be able to put 47 healthy players out there on the field. And I think that was the whole idea of the NFL expanding the practice squads and basically turning the practice squad into a taxi squad. I believe there's exceptions there. You could be a veteran and be on the practice squad this year. And that was the whole thing, because if someone tests positive, we move that person to the side, isolate as soon as possible, so we make sure that that person does not transmit the virus to others, remove them temporarily from our team population, and then call up a healthy player who hasn't been exposed. And obviously, with all these tracing measures they have, the electronic wrist bands that most teams are using, tracing your close contacts, it seems to me that Tennessee finally has this thing, squared away where, maybe they expected that coach who tested positive 2 days ago, that last positive they had, maybe they expected that coach as a possible positive because of the contact tracing. So my thinking is they're not expecting any more positives. They will have a clean day tomorrow, and they will play this game against Buffalo. They'll be a little shorthanded. They too bad, they didn't get a chance to practice. Well, that's some of their punishment, I guess you could say. But they are coming off some long rest. Hopefully the Bills won't be looking ahead to the Chiefs next week. I think the Bills will take care of business here. But obviously that's my biased opinion. It'll be a tough test. Tennessee's 3-0, but I think Buffalo gets to 5-0. The other thing about Tennessee, they've squeaked by. A win is a win, and they found a way. But they've squeaked by in each of the first 3 games, and now they have this COVID controversy. So it'll be interesting to find out what type of Tennessee team we will see on Tuesday night. But I think the Bills move to 5-0. Was never a huge Ryan Tannehill fan. The Bills, even when they stink, they were always able to handle Tannehill. So I think he has a 4-7 record against them with the Dolphins, and some really ugly games.
Yeah, we'll talk more about this one tomorrow when we're joined by Russell Landy. It's amazing. We almost got an hour through the show, John, and we haven't even spoken about the Saints, who are hosting the Chargers. More big news, Michael Thomas not going to play here. He was supposed to come back from injury, facing a team discipline after punching Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in a practice. You hear that the majority of the locker room actually took the side of Chauncey Gardner. So suddenly the Saints now shorthanded. They do get Jared Cook and Sheldon Rankins back, but we talked about the way Herbert went neck and neck with Brady a couple weeks ago. I think you're going to see another shootout here. I know the Saints are favored by a touchdown, but I'm putting them on upset alert.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things are interesting. The second game that Herbert played, he was literally throwing to his, the next guy up, right? You saw Tyron Johnson, who's been on their practice roster. Guyton scored a touchdown. They went to Parham, who was playing in the XFL. So that's not exactly, Antonio Gates and, and the usual suspects that you're hearing there. I think the problem that you see now is the guy that would have been, to me, the ace in the hole in this game would have been Austin Eckler, right? That gives the Saints a lot of trouble, is a guy like that, because their backers, when you have to have them thinking about covering that guy like that, that's where they seem to run into some issues, with things. So now if you get into that kind of shootout mold, and they've played a couple of games without Michael Thomas, right? So they've gotten used to that. Sanders has gotten more in the mix. They like spreading Jared Cook out, when they have that, and use Kamara. It's probably a similar scenario and another similar type result in the game, there that, can they play all 4 quarters? The one thing that the Saints are bringing, and it's an amazing stat when you think about how long it's gone, no 100-yard rusher since 2017. So you're going into every game at this point knowing, and now you're playing with your backup running back, and he's a good-looking football player, don't get me wrong. But you're going into it with an average O-line, which is what Chargers have, a few missing pieces. Mike Williams, we'll see if he plays, and that you don't run the ball. I mean, you're going to get 80 or less. Even on the game that they lost, Jacobs only had 65. Now, they ran for about 100 total, but it wasn't like Josh Jacobs had a field day, against them. So I think that's the tough part of the road game for San Diego. The less tough part is that you're playing with nobody in the dome on a Monday night. But you got to remember, unless you're Sean McVay, who's 6-1 coming back and forth to the East, San Diego will have left yesterday to come out due to all the COVID rules. So you got all of that travel, and teams have done poorly except for the Rams, who have come east a couple of times and won, and the Dolphins, who went west, and it looked like the Niners didn't know what time the game was yesterday. So I think that's the difficult part. But the long-term situation is when you have 2 guys and something goes on. We've seen it when Michael Westbrook smoked Stephen Davis and got into it. The club supported Stephen Davis, and Michael Westbrook was not long for the world. Now, those were very comparable players at that time, 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver. Now you have your premier superstar, who was outspoken when the stuff with Drew Brees happened, has been outspoken on other issues, pro and con, got into it verbally, then got into it physically, and what likely led to the suspension is when that dies down, you have to be enough of a pro or mature enough to then let it die down to continue with practice. It seems like Gardner at least then came back to, like chilling with the group of people that were pulling him to the side, whereas Michael Thomas may have used a few expletives with his teammates and with the assistant coaches that were trying to kind of calm him down. And that's where the suspension has come in. It seems like the suspension is coming in for how he treated everybody in the moments after the fight, right? Because you then want to get everybody back together. Hey, there's no place for that. We're on the same. You want to make your little speech and get moving. If you don't give the coach, if you don't give your coordinator, the receiver coach, the guy that just thinks he can kind of quiet everybody down, and I've been in that role before, if that guy just won't shut up, he's going to get kicked out of practice. And if he gave a mouthful back to Peyton or others, knowing how those guys work, they are always going to toe the company line of there's nobody bigger than the team. And then they'll deal with it and hopefully respond as a club tonight. But it'll be interesting to see if there's ever any kind of long-lasting effects, in that scenario, because now this is embarrassing to a guy like Michael Thomas to have to explain at some point whether he wants to or not. But it is a really good sign, maybe not for the game, not for anybody's fantasy football team, but as an organization, it is a really good sign that you are not willing to just let that guy get away with that, because you know right now who's in charge. And I mean, it should not be a big surprise that Sean Payton is in charge, because that does not happen. You do not suspend a top 3 player on your team without everybody being in lockstep. And we certainly know there's a lot of teams that wouldn't want to get into that kind of situation, with their guy coming back off an injury with a big game at home, seeing what other teams in your conference are doing. That's not a game you want to lose tonight. And it is, like you mentioned, it is a winnable game for the Chargers. Winnable if their defensive line can create enough pressure to give Drew Brees problems. But I think the Austin Eckler, to me, would have been the difference maker. I see the Saints in a shootout, but something where the shootout is all on, Justin again to be the guy he's been in these weeks, because you just don't run on the Saints. And with their running game, when it's really not got the ebb and flow of having him and Eckler together, I can see Kelly having a good game on his own, but it's still going to be a 60 to 80-yard output. That would have to be the breaker tomorrow, is that the Chargers changed the momentum of that game by being able to consistently run the ball, because that's what you saw in a lot of these games over the weekend. The game changer is how teams were able to do something different that the opposing defense did not seem they were as prepared for as in prior weeks.
All right, we got to wrap things up here. I think the Saints will have a run game. Joshua Kelly will take it to them. John's going with the Saints. I'm going with the Chargers. Ryan Roberts, quick prediction and parting shot for the people.
Yeah, I'd pick the Saints too. I would just like to say, as a Michael Thomas fantasy owner, I would like to punch him in the face at the moment as well. Thursday, 8:30 Eastern Time p.m., we are running at NFL Draft Bible a HBCU senior showcase, 5 of the best players for HBCU programs heading into the season. Their season obviously getting pushed to the spring. We'll be profiling them, their careers, all the accomplishments they've had. We'll also have Jordan Reed from the Draft Network on, who played quarterback at North Carolina Central. So RSVP to the event at ryan@nfldraftbible.com. Sign up for the event, again, 8:30 Eastern Time on Thursday nights.
Yeah, and make sure you check out that whole series on our YouTube channel over at the All Access Football Network. We've got the FCS Spotlight Show, the D2 Spotlight Show, and now the HBCU Spotlight Show. You can find them all there. Of course, NFLDraftBible.com for all of your news and information. And, of course, the 2021 Virtual Draft Guide. Ralph Ventri, as always, thank you for joining us here every Monday. Parting shot for the people. And a game prediction as you take your butt.
Sure. I like the Chargers. Yep. I like the Chargers tonight. I think they have some renewed energy from Justin Herbert. I think the Saints were a bit overrated heading into this season. There's so much going on, so many stuff, so much to talk about. I don't even know what I want to choose for a parting shot, but I guess I'll just ask, where has the defense gone? Points on points on points. Defenses are struggling. Even Seattle, their defense is really nothing, has been nothing to write home about. But I think they are one of the elite teams in the NFC. Where has the defense gone? And also shout out to the Dallas Cowboys for having Andy Dalton as a backup quarterback. Extremely important. And they have somebody who can come in now and win games and get them to the playoffs after Dak's devastating injury. But thanks a lot for letting me chop it up with you guys. But will we see any defense this year? I mean, everybody's scoring in the 30s. It's like if the Bills want to beat the Chiefs next week, they're going to have to go into the 40s, Oh, and one more thing, Rick, for you. How about those Raiders, man? The Raiders. I like what I'm seeing from Derek Carr. He may have a little bit of a resurgence this season.
I'm telling you, the Raiders are something to watch out for, and I don't think that was a win of luck yesterday. So I like the Raiders a lot, as you guys know. Of course, we've got our Scouting the Nation notebook coming up on the NFL Draft Bible website in just a few hours. Our scouting notebook from guys like Ryan, John, and myself will be available on the website momentarily. We'll be back at it again tomorrow with Russell Landy. John, a quick parting shot here as we put a ribbon on today's episode.
Yeah, we mentioned it the other day. If you get some time this evening, we love the fact that you interact with us and let us be a part of your football day every day. Just realized down around the coast here and throughout the state, there will still be between 200 and 300,000 people without power this evening. So while you're enjoying watching the Saints game, I'm sure there'll be something from the Red Cross or other come across the bottom of your screen. Take a moment, donate whatever you can, because like I said, having gone through it, I can certainly tell you that, the 48 to 96 hours right after a storm, when you realize what you are now dealing with, when you realize what is ahead of you, can be some really daunting days and daunting hours and stuff. So while we all enjoy the game tonight and enjoy the fact that 2 out of the 3 of you will be totally incorrect with your outcomes of the score, sit back, and the one thing we all can agree upon is any type of donation or even just having the recognition to talk about it amongst yourselves and your peers to let them know what's going on there. It is a long way back. And in just wrapping up, that literally landed only 12 miles from the storm that landed less than 6 weeks ago. So you can imagine, where you might be at 6 weeks removed from something like that, only to have it literally land 10 to 12 miles away from the last one. So quite the endeavor that they're going to have down there on the coast. It is the least protected area, amongst the coast area, because there's no way to really build accurate seawalls to any length or degree down there. So it's all kind of man-made structures that are out there, and a category 2 to 3 hurricane is just going to kind of demolish any of that. So like I said, there's literally 200,000 to 300,000 people that are still without power, and probably will be without power for several more Monday night games. But hopefully the Saints winning tonight will give those people a little bit of comfort and will put me several games ahead of Rick.
Well, we will come back. We'll break it all down, and we will keep the NFLDraftBible.com promo running. 50% of all sales for all access subscribers will get donated right to the Red Cross of the Hurricane Delta relief. So log on NFLDraftBible.com. You will get the official 2021 NFL Draft Bible publication, the PDF, instant access to all of our scouting reports, over 300 in the can already, in addition to Scout Speak, our new book by Neil Stratton, and 50% of all the sales will be donated to the Red Cross Hurricane Delta relief. So help us, help them, help you, help them, help us. Log on NFLDraftBible.com. Go all access. Make sure you check out our Thursday night affair with Ryan Roberts. Again, shout out to the director of scouting, Ryan Roberts, the Northeast Conference co-commissioner, Ralph Ventri, of course, the VP of player personnel for the Toronto Argonauts, my co-host, John Murphy, and me, RIC, in the place to be, reporting from New Jersey. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.